Welcome to the Period Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Donovan, registered dietitian and period recovery expert who has been where you are. This podcast is for the active, high-achieving woman who feels like she's doing everything right in her life, but her body isn't responding. Whether you've just discovered you have hypothalamic amenorrhea or you feel like you've already tried it all in regards to getting your period back and restoring your fertility, or you're on your journey to become a mom, you're in the right place. Here, we go beyond just getting your period back. We talk about fueling your body, regulating your nervous system, redefining your relationship with food and exercise, and stepping into the version of you that feels strong, feminine, and fully you. This is your safe space for honest conversations, expert guidance, and the deeper work that creates lasting change. So you can take the stress and the guess out, restore and keep your period and your fertility and your connection to yourself. Get ready to be inspired, get ready to feel seen, and finally get your period and life back. Let's go. So today we have one of my favorite professional guests on here, Dr. Chrisandra Shufelt, who is leading the way in hypothalamic amenorrhea research. And as you know, probably the one in, I can't remember how much she mentioned, people that are not getting the diagnosis or being told they need the pill or just not getting proper treatment for HA. And that's because the research isn't there. To date, there is 14 original publications, maybe 13. And we're talking thousands for PCOS. So just to give you an idea of that, we need you. So I need you to listen to this amazing podcast with Dr. Shufelt because not only is she going to share how you can be a part of healing HA in this entire world, but she talks about the findings of the cardiovascular link to FHA, functional hypothalamic amenorrhea. So she talks about the findings that are kind of disturbing, but also there's a really good outcome with proper treatment. She also talks about the registry that is worldwide that you can be a part of. And then my favorite part of the discussion, which that comes at the end, we talk about the micro and macronutrients of HA and the difference between women with HA and women with not HA. And it's very interesting to see. And I think you're really going to be like, So without further ado, let's dive into the episode and talk with Dr. Chrisandra Shufelt. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to welcome back Dr. Shufelt to the podcast. I think, Dr. Shufelt, this is your third or maybe fourth time here?
Yeah, I think it's our third time together.
Yeah, so it's becoming at least twice a year or at least an annual thing over the years as so much is developing in functional hypothalamic amenorrhea studies. And so today we're going to dive into what studies have already have happened, at least at the Mayo Clinic with Dr. Shufelt and her team, and then what is coming in the future and updates from previous podcasts we have because we've tried to recruit women through various modalities so that we can get more answers, because I think everybody knows here that when they end up going to their doctor, they're not getting answers. They're getting the pill, they're getting progesterone, they're not getting what they need. So I'm going to just welcome here Dr. Shufelt, and let's dive into what's been happening in the research world when it comes to HA.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. It's so wonderful being back and just to be able to share some of our exciting findings as well as our research. And you've been a really big advocate in helping get the word out about research because, as we know, this is such an understudied area in women's health. I mean, it's phenomenal to me that if you go back, PubMed is our big medical journal search engine online. It's actually funded by the government. And if you put in functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, and you can actually go back to 2017 to 2024 and take away, case reports, take away review articles. We're talking about original research. Even in the 2017, which is, by the way, when the Endocrine Society last talked about HA, and up until even 2025, 13 publications in this space. So not only is it just a tremendously under-researched area, but as well as what you just kind of described, which is the under education of physicians and, here's a pill and it's going to fix it, because we know that as we've talked about in the past, is not fixing the underlying condition. So, but thank you to everyone who's always been a promoter of our research. My research, we've just completed a 5-year study that we are now looking at the data. We have some preliminary, very interesting analysis. And the first study we looked at was done at Mayo Clinic, was called Amenorrhea Related Cardiovascular Health. So we call it ARCH for short. And what we know is that when women after menopause naturally normally drop their estrogen level, that can impact heart health. So the idea was to look at women who are young, average age in their 20s, that abnormally drop their estrogen levels, and could that impact their heart health? So, our preliminary research that we did before this big study really found that about 1 in every 3 women with FHA have an early signal for vascular endothelial dysfunction. It's a huge word. What does it mean? It just means that, it's the inside lining of the blood vessel. When you need more blood supply, it should dilate. And when you it should also constrict. That is under control a lot by estrogen. We know estrogen promotes dilation of blood vessels. And so our initial hypothesis was what was happening to young women who were abnormally losing their estrogen at an early age. We now know that is just not just about estrogen. There's a lot more complex changes to the body, but we had this hypothesis. So what we found was that about 1 in every 3 women with FHA had abnormal blood vessel linings. And why is that important? Well, it is an early sign that could potentially lead to heart disease. Heart disease is where we get blocked arteries 10, 20 years later. So I always say it's like if you've ever lined up dominoes in a line, it's the first domino in the cascade that could eventually lead to blockages or, heart disease. And you're in your 20s. You're not thinking about these types of things. You're not thinking that, oh, my missed period could actually be impacting my heart. But you know that missing your period may not be good for your heart. And that was really kind of our call to action, and to try to find out, first of all, who are the 1 in 3 women that are getting abnormal blood vessel function? Is it your over exercisers? Is it your under disordered eaters? Or is it restricted eating? Or is it your stressors? So, and we know FHA does not, as you've told me, it doesn't live in these little silos. And so, is it kind of a sprinkling of each? Or is it just your stressors? Or is it your stressors that are exercising to try to relieve their stress? And is exercising without estrogen not a good thing? So that's what our current study that we just completed was trying to answer. So in order to answer that question, we brought women down to our Jacksonville Mayo Clinic campus in Florida. And what we did was we measured vascular health, all with blood pressure cuffs, little cuffs on the fingertips. And then we gave every woman a Fitbit, and we had them go home. Just if you were trying to recover, we didn't stop you. We just asked you to continue to do what your regular lifestyle was. Um, but if you were, seeing Cynthia, if you were seeing a life coach, we didn't disrupt that. We just wanted to understand what exercise patterns and eating patterns, because we had women do food diaries. And then also we had questionnaires about stress. We had blood markers that we collected when they came down here about stress and about hormones. And then we followed these women for 3 months, and we were able to really quantify exercise patterns as well as sleep patterns, as well as how many minutes you were, extremely exercising. And so we're now able to take all of those pieces and put it together and say, okay, who's the 1 in 3 women that we're seeing the signal for vascular health, and who's the 2 out of 3 women that we're not? Because at the end of the day, we want to be able to take that domino and move it back so that if you tip it over, it doesn't tip the next one and tip the next one and tip the next one and then the next one, and then, lead eventually to blockages in the artery. So that study just finished. We have 108 women, all with FHA, that we all did all of this data. So if you can imagine how many data points we're looking at
Mm.
using artificial intelligence, like network analysis, to try to put all these pieces together, because we have hundreds, if not thousands, data points that we're going to be
Mhm.
able to really synthesize. Because you know, this is not an easy condition to even describe or teach, but also to analyze as well.
Yeah. So many variables when it comes to
Yeah. And then
okay.
we just ended up presenting kind of an initial look at the role of stress. So I always say stress is so hard to measure because we can measure it in the bloodstream with cortisol, but we know cortisol changes and fluctuates
Mm.
even throughout the day, throughout the night. So if you don't measure an early morning cortisol, it can be inaccurate. We also know cortisol can change, over time. So cortisol is a blood measurement, but it's not terribly stable or accurate. But my whole passion in this FHA research is, what is stress to one woman is different than stress to the next woman. Like, I went to medical school. That was pretty stressful. Versus, another woman who is competing in an athletic, competition. That's stressful as well. But what is one stress to another woman that then tips over and stops the menstrual cycle or having a period? So we have a questionnaire that is, whenever you do research, you have to have validated questionnaires. You don't want to
Mhm.
just be asking, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you? No, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you have to use validated questionnaires. So there's a validated questionnaire called the Perceived Stress Scale. And it's been used in many different areas of stress research, but basically it's a 10-item scale that is a validated self instrument. So you can answer it, that measures the degree to which any individual, male or female, appraises the situation in their life as being stressful. So to me, that was important in asking these
Mm.
women that came down for the study, because we know the role of stress and how important it is in the role of FHA. So here's just some ideas of the stress. So, like, these are the questions. In the last month, how often have you been upset because of something that happened unexpectedly? How often have you felt nervous or, quote, stressed? In the last month, how often have you felt that things were going your way? And then another one was, how often have you been angered about how, because of things that were outside of your control? So there were
Yeah.
10 questions, and women answered them. Now, just to kind of, and then we get a validated score. And then the perceived stress score is a number that we can kind of say, hey, what would be high perceived stress to these women versus low. So we took basically the average. Now the average stress score was 18, um, and so we cut it in half. So we said, if you went above 18 in this score, then how we considered that high perceived stress. Um, and if you went below 18 or equal to 18, we said that was lower perceived stress. But just to kind of put things on the same playing
Yeah.
field, like, moderate perceived stress is around 14. So all these women, I would say, had pretty high stress, perceived stress.
Mm.
But what we wanted to do was make a cutoff right in the middle, and we used 18. So about half of the women fell above it, about half the women fell below it. We wanted to see if that impacted their domino, if that impacted their
Mhm.
vascular health. And we found that of the first 84 patients that we looked at, their average age was 29, with a range of about 5 years plus or minus. And we still found that 1 in 3 women had that vascular dysfunction of the 84. But of those women that reported high perceived stress, it was statistically lower. The vascular function was very low if
Mm,
you among those categorized as having high stress. And then if you looked at the proportion of women that had high stress, it was also statistically higher if those women had reported very high stress. They were more likely to have vascular dysfunction. So that tells me that stress is kind of floating to the top as one of the reasons that we've seen
mm,
this signal for heart. We also have the advantage of looking at bone health because all these women underwent bone scans,
mm,
bone DEXA scans, and body composition scans. So while this is an early finding that we presented at the Endocrine Society in Chicago, it really does speak to the fact that that this is well beyond estrogen alone, and probably the role of stress, perceived stress, and cortisol plays such a big role. Now, it's a little scary, right, that you have
yeah.
FHA and we found a signal that 1 in every 3 women have this vascular dysfunction.
Mm,
But here's the good news. There is always good news. There's always a silver lining. And without me planning this, the women enrolled for 3 months. We found about 20 to 25% of the women recovered their menstrual cycles during the study. So that gave us an advantage of looking at vascular health before they recovered and then after they recovered. Now, how do we determine recovery? It was just self reported bleeding with a period. It wasn't like through hormones or anything like that. So it's still preliminary, but I can confidently say that it looks like the signal for vascular function returns after a menstrual cycle. And that still needs to be answered, but
yay.
I think it's important to know.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I just want to say for anyone listening, when you hear Dr. Shufelt talk about stress, like uh, the stress alone, because sometimes we read between the lines, the stress alone of, the say the 10 questionnaires is not like we don't lose our periods just because we're stressed. So
Right.
that's what I'm just trying to say. There's always confounding factors of underfueling, whether that is just underfueling. Um, our bodies don't care about the intentions. We were just talking pre-show about my rhabdo diagnosis, and I'm like, but I was just having fun, and like our bodies don't care about the intentions of our under. Well, for me, it was overworking my muscles that I should have been training a little bit more for, and a little bit of hydration. But I'm going to talk about that on another podcast episode. But, our bodies don't care about the intentions of, the underfueling, whether it's coming from over exercising or it's just baseline underfueling. Stress alone doesn't cause a missing period. Now, stress can contribute to you maybe wanting to exercise more, to for stress relief and stuff. But I don't want to go too far into the behavioral aspects of this and kind of stay a little bit more researchy. And I love hearing that there is hope that if we take care of our bodies, that it's not like this is an irreversible, like once you lose your period, you're done for and you're going to be, I think, Dr. Chuvelt, correct me if I'm wrong, heart disease in at least the US is the leading cause of death in
Yep.
women.
Remains the leading cause of death
Yeah.
at all age groups. And that it has been declining in some older women, but it's really hit a plateau in younger women. And so that middle age, that 35 to 44-year-old women, we've seen a plateau and in some groups, an increase in terms of racial ethnic diversity. Heart disease doesn't happen overnight. So 35 to 44-year-olds, you need to look back 10 years to see what habits you're
Hmm.
doing that can impact you at 35 to 44. Now, on the other extreme is the obesity pandemic. So, you've got this, FHA, no periods, big, this is not normal. And then you've got the other extreme of the obesity. So there's a lot of things that go into that, just that heart disease possibly going up or plateauing in 35 to 44. So it's not just obviously one thing. But I think you make a really important point. This perceived stress score was a validated questionnaire about how people perceive their stress, and it was more psychological stress. And in really working with women in this area, I really have come to appreciate that there is metabolic stress
Mm,
that we don't consider as stress. So metabolic stress to me is what we do when you're extremely exercising. What happened to you with your recent hospitalization with rhabdo? So that's a metabolic stress that we don't think of because when we talk about stress in society, we start to only think about what's happening, how we're feeling, and how we
yeah.
perceive it. But there is also a large component of metabolic stress that goes into this condition. So how that also plays a role is really important. And now we're
Yeah.
just getting some of the markers back in terms of things like inflammation markers as well as, you know, uh, eh, they call them immunocytokines, so they're actually how our body is responding to an inflammation response, so we can actually look at those components in these women with HA and determine, is there is there more inflammation in certain women, and is that leading to the vascular changes that we're seeing versus other women that might not have that. So it's going to be a really exciting time in the next, even 12 months. We're going to be really able to understand a lot more. And, I spoke about those 100, those 13 publications from 2017 to 2000 or 2024. Most of those studies, their sample sizes or the number of women with FHA at most were 20. We have
Mm,
108. So I think that the 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 fact that we were able to recruit this many women and really take a deep dive over 3 months into lifestyle and understand what women were doing, with this condition, I think we'll be able to answer a lot more questions than any other
yeah.
study to date has.
Absolutely. And I just want to go back for a moment with I think you said there was how many original publications of
Mhm.
FHA?
13.
13? And how many original publications just to give our audience an idea of PCOS? Do you know that off the top of your head? I used to have
I actually do.
yeah.
And I don't ever wanna say that we're comparing one to another in young women, but
Yes.
it just shows you the lack of research in
Yes.
FHA compared to PCOS. And PCOS, in that same time range, it's close to 3,000.
Mhm.
So, we're talking about less than 0.1% of that. So, a lot more research needs to be done. And
Yeah.
when I started this study, what was so profound to me is that we recruited a lot through social media because women with this condition aren't getting answers from their doctors. So they're seeking answers through social media. And that really does speak to the fact that women are thought leaders and trying to get information from
Yes.
other women, and it also speaks to the fact that this is not just about physicians and healthcare providers treating it. It's about nutritionists. It's about
Mm,
exercise physiologists. It's about even psychologists that work on body dysmorphism and life coaching. So to me, that was also a really profound, um, meaningful way that I could get women enrolled in the study. And from that, we published a paper in a pretty prestigious journal called Contemporary Clinical Trials on
mm,
how to recruit women with rare conditions. And you have to
mm.
put your word out there. You've got to go through social media. You've got to advertise, um, through where, go where the money is. Go to these social media groups that are talking
Yeah.
about it. Go to online forums like Reddit and
Yep.
and Instagram and really try to understand where these women are coming from. So because of
Yeah.
that, we started getting phone calls. Our research started getting phone calls from women around the world. My first phone call
Yeah.
was from a woman in I had a Costa Rica, I had Japan, I had Egypt, and then I had this aha moment that I was so concentrating on women in the United States that this is a worldwide issue. And if we're not answering the questions in a country that has the best medical care in the world,
Yeah.
what are these women in other countries having to face? And
Mm,
it it then got me understanding that there are women living in war-torn countries, displaced from homes.
mm, mm.
They're living in areas that they are restricted eating patterns because of not by choice, but because of situations.
Yeah.
So it really made me want to open an international registry. So about a year and a half ago, we did that. We opened an international group of a registry, online registry, and it was really to understand and to build a registry to include women with FHA, um, to understand how common is it around the world, um, are there racial and ethnic diversities
Mhm.
around the world, and also what are the underlying causes around the world? And then are there risk factors? We don't really even know what some of the symptoms are beyond just you don't have your period. We know that it impacts bone. So we started this registry, and women are now being followed over 5 years. So anyone can do this with this condition. It's as long as you have a diagnosis by a healthcare professional, or you have blood work to indicate it. But if you don't, we provide that. Um, if you live in the United States, if you don't, we give a list of suggested lab work for you to get with your provider, and then we ask questions. I mean, the purpose of a registry is really to understand what's the next unanswered question. So women answer questions. Um, it takes about 10 minutes. They do a questionnaire at baseline, at 3 months, and then annually thereafter. So, because of that registry, we've had over 200 women enroll. We validated that they all have HA, and we've presented now at two international conferences. One was in Rome at the International Society for Gynecological Endocrinology, and we took the first 128 patients that were in that group registry, and it was from 28 countries. That tells you right there. That was really, and the average age was 27. The average body mass index was 19.4. So very consistent with what we see just alone in the United States. And we actually had asked about symptoms. Now, could you imagine or could you guess what the top 5 symptoms women report that have HA?
Let's see. Well, no period.
No, it was,
Digestive issues.
oh, good one. So the constipation was right up there.
Okay.
Constipation and, but also common was diarrhea. So you had kind of the flip.
Okay.
So we had both,
So
but the top
GI
5,
issues. Yeah. Yeah.
so GI issues were up there. The number one complaint, which was happened in 75% of women that were in the first 126 women, 75% of women complained of low libido.
I was gonna say that. Yeah. Yeah. Low
And
libido.
then the second one was feeling cold often.
Oh, okay. Yep. Mhm.
So that was 72% of women. And that's interesting because when you lose your estrogen after menopause, you feel hot all the time, right? We're treating hot flashes.
Mhm.
But this is a different situation because you're losing estrogen in a different pathway, a different way. But these women were feeling cold often. Number 3 was anxiety. Number 4 was the constipation. And number 5
Mm,
was vaginal dryness, which probably goes along with number 1, which is low libido.
mhm.
That didn't surprise me as a hormone specialist, is
Mhm.
because we know that when we lose estrogen, one of the most sensitive tissues that can actually dry is the vaginal
Mhm.
tissue. So women
Mm,
can actually be more prone to getting bladder infections, which we know as UTIs. They can be
yeah.
more prone to other kind of vaginal infections. So fatigue was up there. It was about 1 in every 3 women reported
Yeah.
fatigue. Low blood pressure. We know this condition kind of goes hand in hand with low blood pressure.
Yeah.
And then hair loss was up there,
Mm,
probably because of the nutritional status. So to me, it was a really nice way to ask women with HA, hey, what are some of your symptoms? We didn't ask. We asked them to just do a checkbox of what their symptoms that
yeah.
they might be having. And then we asked an open ended question about symptoms. So the other questions that we asked was about like forgetfulness, and are they having challenges thinking or remembering things,
Yeah.
or like a little fogginess.
Hmm.
And that was also up there too, which makes me want to look at the impact on HA in the brain.
Yeah.
And that could be a definite area of next thought for research.
Yeah.
And then um, we had an excellent medical student join our group for the summer. And I asked her to look at what were the experiences and perceptions of women with FHA that were enrolled in the registry. So, what I mean by that is that when we asked questions about what their healthcare professionals did when they wanted to see them. And so that was pretty fascinating um, because about 10% of them received a diagnosis of PCOS or PMOS, now we're calling it, change
Hmm.
the name.
Hmm.
Um, and then only 2 out of 3 actually received a diagnosis of HA, even though we had confirmed that every woman in this registry
Yep.
had done HA, had HA. The other questions that we asked is what did they recommend to treat you with? Um, and w- we some were given about 50% were given a birth control pill. That doesn't surprise us.
50%. Nope. Nope.
50% were told to increase their calories, and
Okay.
then some were told to decrease exercise. It was about 40%, and then uh, and then there were others that were told to put an IUD in, which is a device that sits in the uterus that secretes progesterone and prevents pregnancy and prevents periods from happening. So it was a little bit all over the place. We looked at both in the US and outside of the US because at that time, we had, at the time that she presented this data, it was almost split 50-50. We had 50% of the women in the United States and 50% outside of the United States. And really, the characteristics didn't change. So,
Okay.
what we're experiencing here in the United States can be echoed by these other 27 countries. So, in terms of their experience. So, I think our next step with this registry is to also try to, because we're coming up on some of the women that are filling out their 1 year evaluation,
Hmm.
and we ask if they've recovered their period in that 1 year and how they did it. So, we'll be able to at least get an idea of what certain women did to get their menstrual cycles back. But I think
Yeah.
it's allowed us to look more broadly at
Mm.
HA research to begin with. It's allowed me to come up with another grant idea, another way to research
Yeah.
this. Because if we don't think about it, it's not going to get done. So I think that was a really important finding.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love hearing the results of this. And this registry, Dr. Shufelt, can women still join it?
Oh yeah, and I can
Okay.
give you the
Yep.
QR code to join that. And
Yes.
then and then
Yes.
I know we're coming up on our time, but I did want to kind of go into one of our publications that we're looked at
Yes.
dietary intake of women with
Yes. Let's
FHA.
talk about that.
Yeah, this was a really exciting study that we published when we looked at women that were compared to age matched control. So the study that I just referenced with all of these, those are just purely HA studies. These are women that all of the women in the study had HA. But
Hmm.
the previous study, we actually took women with HA and we actually compared them to age matched controls that were having their menstrual cycles. So that's where we were able to look at dietary intake in women that were having a monthly menstrual cycle and compare it to women with HA and what they're actually eating. And the difference here is that we looked at micro content, macronutrients, so like proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. And then we looked at micronutrient because we could look at vitamins and minerals. So we had women with FHA compared to normal menstrual cycles that use this 3-day food diaries, these detailed 3-day food diaries. And then we ran that through a processing software system that could give us the breakdown with the micro and
Hmm.
macronutrient. And what surprised us the most was that women with FHA reported eating about the same number of calories as women without FHA in this study. So there was 30 women in each group and they were the same number of calories. They also reported similar levels of exercise. Now that was self-reported. similar levels of
Mm.
exercise. So sometimes women underreport exercise or think that they're doing a lower level than what they're actually doing.
Yes.
However, the composition of their diets were dramatically different. So women with FHA consume more protein, more fiber, and higher amounts of A, vitamin C, and iron from food.
Okay.
So these findings really did suggest that it may not be simply how much women are eating, but what they're eating and whether the
Mm.
nutrition is adequate to match their body's energy. Um, because we know many women with FHA are very health conscious and
Yes.
they often choose nutrient dense foods, but their choices might not translate into having sufficient energy, as you know, as you counsel. So,
Hmm.
but the micronutrients I think was really important because despite having a very high level of vitamin C is not necessarily good for you. And also, vitamin D was low in both groups, but especially in women with FHA. And we know that that
Hmm.
also plays an impact in bone health, and we know FHA plays an impact in bone health. So, our study didn't prove that dietary patterns causes FHA, but it does highlight that there's nutritional changes that are more complex in women with FHA compared to women with regular menstrual cycles. So I find that another really important area that warrants more how our nutritional intake with HA impacts our bone and impacts our vascular health. And that's the next thing that we're going to also be able to answer.
Yeah, yeah, and I would have to say, Dr. Shufelt, I conclude with the um the the differences in the macronutrient makeup, and the micronutrient for that matter. That makes a lot of sense. And heavy protein. That's why protein is still like, we if we see each other, if someone becomes a client of mine, I'm going to already assume, and I haven't don't think I've been wrong to this day, is that they're always consuming more protein than
More
anything.
protein.
Unless they started recovery efforts themselves, like, and they're like, okay, I followed your, social media advice, eat more carbs and fats. Then I'm not talking about those women that are already trying recovery on their own, but the women that are still not quite changing their dietary habits. Protein is always, it's a safer food for so many reasons. It's portrayed in social media and media: protein, 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 and carbs. You're addicted to sugar. Don't eat sugar. Um, Fats. Don't eat too much fat because you want to be like. I could go on and on about the things that we have been fed in media, but also we have to think about our upbringing. How were we brought up with viewing food and that, and did something traumatic happen where we developed an eating like, there's so many factors. So I'm not going to spend any more time talking about all the confounding factors that go into that, but I would have to say, like, yes, that is across the board all the time. What I see in women is heavy protein, heavy fiber, and veggies, veggies, veggies. And
Which translates into the vitamin C and A.
yeah.
The interesting thing about the protein is that we need to be very careful about the role of saturated fats because there also tended to be more saturated fat in women that were eating a lot of the protein. Yeah.
Mm.
And yeah,
So, yeah. So, all in all, we need to find a balance with our intake, making sure we have adequate carbs and fats and protein. And, we are having some vegetables still in the right way, making sure they are having nutrient dense, maybe some olive oil, some, quote unquote healthier fats. Yeah, so research is out there. So I know there's a lot of women listening that really need that hard truth and facts. And here is some of it today that Dr. Shufelt has shared with us. And I also want to say, take what you want with it. And what I mean by that is you can consume all the information. Like, these are the facts, these are the facts. Are we making the behavioral changes that are necessary to reverse this? Right?
yep,
Because we
yeah.
can get into overconsumption mode of like all the information. So you just want to take a pause and ask yourself, am I taking some of this information and implementing some of it? And if I'm not implementing some of it, can I get support in implementing it? Because having a missing period and going through eating differently, eating quote unquote more. I like to say differently because as a result of what Dr. Shufelt just said, like the women were eating the same amount of calories. Like,
Mhm.
so eating differently. So it's not always about eating more. And I think a lot of women get caught up, oh my God, I got to eat more. I'm going to gain all this weight and all the things. Like sometimes it's just about eating differently,
Definitely.
and changing that language around that. So the facts are there. But if this is not something that is very easy to do alone.
Mhm.
So having somebody, in your corner, um, helping guide you through this and giving you not only the facts, but how to change the behavior. Because I was talking to Dr. Chevelle, I'm like, we're doing two things at once. We are eating differently, resting differently, exercising differently, but we're also kind of combating all these old thoughts and behaviors and belief patterns around all those things. So give yourself lots of grace. You're doing some incredibly challenging things, but you can do it. So many women have recovered already, and if you're listening to, you can as well. So Dr. Shufelt, is there anything else you want to leave women listening with today? And we're going to link everything that we talked about in the show notes so you guys have that and you can join the registry.
Yeah, no, the join the research registry, get the word out about the registry, because if we don't have your voice in the research to know where the next research should go, we won't be able to make the strides that we need to make with this research area, and then we won't be able to train the next generation of providers, physicians,
Yeah.
nutritionists, and it's every single piece counts. So if you feel like, oh, I might not be the person that should answer these questions, no, we want to hear from you, because
Yes.
every single woman counts. And like I said, it was a real aha moment coming on social media and understanding that women are seeking information because they're not getting it in the doctor's office. So I just thank your listeners, and I thank you, Cynthia, for having me on and
Yes.
being able to share
My
this
pleasure.
information. It's just, I always tell my team of researchers, it's just you guys make me look good because I get to then go to these conferences and prevent at a national level and get attention that is needed to this condition. So thank you again.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Shufelt. It is so needed. So, so, so needed. So if you can help us by, just playing your part, taking a few minutes, looking at the registry, and yeah, you can make literally a world of difference. It's been 15 years since I was diagnosed with HA. Well, actually, no, I take that back. 10 years because I searched for 5 years
Hmm.
and it's still happening today. So yeah, let's be the change we wish we want to see in the world and for our future kids and so forth. So thank you again, Dr. Shufelt, for being here.
Awesome. Thank you.
To all the amazing women out there, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Take a moment to reflect on what resonated and how you can start applying it to your own recovery journey. I truly want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and listening to the podcast. I know there are so many podcasts and resources out there, and it means the world to me that you're choosing to spend this time with me. If you're looking for more support on your recovery journey, visit my website, periodnutritionist.com. And if this episode supported you, it would mean the world to me, again, if you just subscribed, left a review, or shared it with another woman who needs to hear this. The more we talk about missing periods and fertility, the more women we could support. Are you ready to get your period back and step into the woman you were meant to be? I'll see you in 2 weeks.